Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take stacks of sources, pull them apart, and try to find those core insights, those surprising bits of knowledge. Today, we're doing a deep dive into Mel Robbins' book, Let Them. It's all about finding, well, self-liberation through what she calls radical acceptance. Now, if you know Robbins' work, you know she's really good at actionable psychology. I mean, her background is solid. She was a lawyer, then became this huge speaker, famous for the 5-second rule. That was
Yeah.
simple, right? But profound. That book was about getting unstuck, overcoming inertia. Let Them, though, it tackles something different, something maybe more pervasive, this obsession we have with control.
Yeah, the timing on this book feels really spot on, doesn't it? I mean, we're just soaked in this era of social media comparison. Everyone's constantly curating this, external life. And that pressure, it creates this huge anxiety, this need to manage perceptions, expectations, even how people around us behave. Robin's work really cuts right through that. It's a direct challenge.
Absolutely. And the question she kind of throws out there to you, the listener, is pretty direct. When you're constantly chasing external approval, always comparing yourself to some impossible ideal, how do you actually find real freedom? Sustainable freedom? How do you stop trying to manage the entire world?
And that's exactly the mission we're exploring here. Robbins gives us this framework. It's pragmatic, but also deeply empathetic, I think, for shifting your focus. It's really a guide to prioritizing self-compassion, actual personal freedom, and your own well-being. And the way she says to do that is through setting boundaries, but also fostering deep self-acceptance and building up that resilience. It's like a roadmap for taking back your agency by letting go of control.
Okay, let's definitely unpack that roadmap. Because the core argument in Let Them, and it does feel a bit counterintuitive at first, is basically this. Real empowerment. It comes entirely from focusing your energy, which is finite, right? On yourself, on your reactions, not on that draining, impossible task of trying to control other people or what they think or what they do.
Precisely. And she doesn't just leave it as a big idea. She breaks this huge philosophical thing down into 10 key principles. Think of them as the steps on the map. We can probably group them maybe like internal stuff you need to build, and then the external strategies you use to protect that internal space.
Okay, yeah, let's start inside, because that feels like where the real power shift has to happen first. It's like building a new foundation for yourself, starting with accepting imperfection. And from Robin's perspective, that's way more than just saying, oh, I'm okay.
Right. She has a much sharper way of putting it. Think about all the energy we waste trying to hide flaws or chasing some perfect ideal that doesn't even exist. It's huge. She makes this really sticky point. She says perfectionism isn't about quality. It's just fear in a sharp suit, which I love. The goal she pushes for is seeing mistakes not as like the end of the world, but as totally necessary chances to grow. Data points, almost.
That reframing really does set the stage for the next bits, doesn't it? Like prioritizing self-care and adopting that growth mindset. And self-care here isn't just, bubble baths. It's recognizing that looking after your mental and physical health is actually fundamental. It's the prerequisite for freedom, not some reward you get later.
Exactly. And the growth mindset connects right into that. It's deciding consciously to view challenges as springboards, opportunities to learn something, not just walls you hit. This internal work is so key. Chapter 4 really gets into it, guiding you through that self-discovery piece, like figuring out your actual core values before you try to live by them. Makes sense.
Okay, so you do that internal work, and then you get to the application part, which is where the title Let Them really clicks, right? If you've done that groundwork, then you can actually start to embrace personal freedom, making choices that line up with your values, not what everyone else thinks you should do.
And that is intrinsically tied, completely linked to letting go of control. Robbins basically argues that real power, your actual power, lies only in managing your own actions and your internal responses, not trying to dictate or even just endlessly influence what other people do. You steer your own ship. You have to let the other ship sail their own course.
Okay, but hang on. I have to push back on that a little because I can hear listeners thinking, okay, that sounds kind of passive. If I'm dealing with a colleague who's always undermining me, or maybe a partner with habits that are genuinely destructive, or even just a friend who's always late, if I just let them keep doing that, doesn't that make me like complicit? Or like I'm enabling bad behavior? Where's the line Robbins draws between acceptance and just letting things slide?
That is such a critical distinction. And yeah, she definitely tackles that head on in the book, especially when she gets into boundaries later on. She makes it really clear. Letting go of control is absolutely not the same as letting go of consequences. Or letting go of your self-respect. Not at all. It means realizing their actions are theirs, period. And your action, your control, is about the decision you make next. So do you set a boundary? Do you physically walk away? Do you change how close you are to that situation or person? The control is all in your response, not in trying to force them to change.
Oh, okay. That shifts the focus completely, doesn't it? It goes from trying to manipulate a situation to just owning your own agency within it. And the way the book is structured seems to back that up. Chapter 1 kicks off with the power of letting go. But then, like you said, Chapter 5 dives into resilience and adversity, which is that grit you need to actually do this stuff. It shows that letting go isn't passive at all. It's actually a really active form of strength.
That's exactly right. And then the path kind of wraps up with practicing gratitude, deliberately shifting your focus to what is working, which feels essential. And that leads right into the ultimate goal, which she covers beautifully in Chapter 8, live authentically, which really means staying fiercely true to yourself, to your values, your passions, no matter what anyone else thinks or says. The whole structure is designed to walk you from that stress of trying to manage everything externally to the peace you find with internal alignment.
Yeah, that philosophical shift is really what grabs you about Let Them. The whole narrative moves from that feeling of frustration, trying to control things you can't, to this profound sense of liberation when you finally accept that.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And the universal message there, it really applies everywhere, doesn't it? Personal peace, fulfillment, they're inside jobs. They come from accepting that other people are autonomous. We can't control them. We can control our choices, our reactions, our boundaries, whether that's accepting a family member's views you disagree with or setting a firm limit in a work conflict.
So thinking about the bigger picture, where does this fit in the whole self-help world? Because, historically, a lot of that genre was about influence, persuasion, power over others, in a way.
Mel Robbins really takes a sharp turn away from that. If you think about classics like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, the whole dynamic is kind of transactional, right? How do I act so you respond the way I want? Let Them flips that completely. It champions self-awareness, radical personal growth as the only path to fulfillment. It's about building such a strong internal core that you're almost immune to external opinions, rather than just learning better ways to manage them.
Okay, this is all great insight, but insight is only useful if you can apply it. So if we want to actually do this, to make this mindset shift happen day to day, what are the practical tools Robbins gives us? We need specifics here, not just vague ideas.
Well, the number one tool, and she really drills down on this in Chapter 2, is setting healthy boundaries. And she provides the scaffolding for it, not just saying set limits. She focuses on the how. It often involves something we could call maybe boundary scripting, like figuring out ahead of time your clear, simple, non-negotiable limits and actually having the exact words ready. So you're not trying to figure it out in the heat of the moment. That takes the emotional negotiation out of it, and boom, your self-respect goes up.
That pre-scripting feels so important because, yeah, that emotional wrestling in the moment is usually where things fall apart. What about tracking? You mentioned focusing on yourself. How does she suggest we track our progress away from that old habit of trying to control everything?
Yeah, she advocates for something, we can maybe call it a control effort inventory.
Yes.
It's about using reflection, maybe journaling, not just to vent, but to actually track. Track the time, the emotional energy you spend trying to manage other people or outcomes versus the time and energy you spend on your own goals, your own well-being. When you actually see that cost, like quantify the hours, the stress it makes letting go feel less like giving up and more like a smart, intentional choice. It highlights the massive drain.
That makes letting go feel less like a fuzzy concept and more like a practical, almost an engineering decision,
Right.
which is helpful. So the overall application is really about making that intentional shift, moving towards self-compassion, using mindfulness, checking in with yourself regularly, making sure your well-being comes first, not the endless, exhausting game of trying to meet external expectations.
Exactly. The goal is centering yourself, protecting that inner world through these deliberate daily actions, accepting that, yeah, uncertainty is real, other people are autonomous, and finding your peace right in the middle of all that.
So let's bring it all home then. If there's one major insight you, the listener, should take away from this deep dive into Let Them, what is it?
I think the biggest thing is that true empowerment, real power, is fundamentally internal. It just is. It's never, ever dependent on getting validation from outside or on other people finally acting the way you wish they would. When you finally manage to let go of that compulsion, that need to manage how others think or behave, that's when you find genuine, lasting freedom and peace.
And the practical lesson, it's about shifting your energy. Stop pouring it into that bottomless pit of seeking external approval that's just a recipe for exhaustion, right? Instead, actively nurture your own internal fulfillment.
Yeah.
That's something you can control, and it's actually sustainable. Robbins really gives us a powerful counterstory to all that societal pressure. She argues for strength in being yourself, prioritizing authenticity over everything else.
Which brings us right back to that tricky nuance we talked about earlier. Maybe the most important question for you to carry forward from this. Robbins pushes for acceptance to find peace. Okay. But where, for you, is that line between healthy acceptance, accepting what you genuinely cannot change, and passivity or complacency? Especially when someone's behavior is actually harming your safety or your well-being. That boundary is yours alone. It's deeply personal. And the only one who can define it, and crucially enforce it, is you.
And that really is the empowered journey Robbins invites us all to take. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Let Them. We'll catch you next time.